ever used a computer? Duh, of course you have. But if I had asked that same question 30 years ago, the answer would be very different. When I was in college back in the dark ages, when computers were first invented, well, not quite, to program, we had one main computer for the students to use on campus. And to write a program, we had little key cards and you would have a stack of cards that would be put in to the computer in order to run your program. And so times have changed in a significant way here in the last days. As a matter of fact, technology is nothing short of amazing in our day. The first general purpose computer began operation in 1946, and it was a breakthrough in its day. The ENIAC, or the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, was 1,000 times faster than anything else that was available at the time. And it could actually perform almost 400 multiplication operations per second. 400 operations a second. Now let me put that in contrast with what's happening today. In 2008, a supercomputer at Arizona State University was able to perform 50 trillion operations in 1 second. So you go from 400 to 50 trillion. Pretty significant difference. The ENIAC stood 8.5 feet high, it was 3 feet wide, and it was 80 feet long, and it weighed 60,000 pounds. 8.5 feet high, 3 feet deep, I guess, and 80 feet long, and it weighed 60,000 pounds. In 2004, scientists were able to duplicate the ENIAC on a silicon chip that was 0.02 inches square. I have a pair of tweezers, and a 0.02 inch square chip would be barely visible on those tweezers. And so they went from, in 1946, a computer that was 8.5 feet high, 3 feet deep, and 80 feet long, weighing 60,000 pounds, to something this size. That's pretty significant to think of the differences. The rapid advance in technology that we have experienced in our day has contributed to incredible changes in our world. And personally, I'm thankful for many of those changes. I'm glad that my cell phone doesn't weigh 30 tons, and I don't have to drag it around, whenever I'm going somewhere. But there are also some drawbacks that we've experienced as a result of our technological advances. At the core of our being is a desire for community. But technology has taken communication, and therefore community, to an entirely new level. Today we can email, IM, chat, text, tweet, write on our friends' walls. We can do all of these things. And although progress in technology has the potential to enrich relationships, and sometimes it does on a long-distance basis, technological advances have also contributed to the regression of relationships in a significant way. Modern electronics have enabled us to become masters of what I call distance friendships. We've become masters of distance friendships. They're friendships that offer minimal substance, but they're relatively safe emotionally. And so we often pursue virtual relationships because we're afraid of the unknown and the potentially unpleasant dynamics that come with real relationships. Don't you think Adam and Eve would have preferred to send God a text after they ate from the tree instead of talking to him face to face? You can see the text. Can't talk now, naked and ashamed, laugh out loud. It's so much easier. Lacking in the skills and personal security needed for conflict resolution, we have become a run in your room and close the door society. Isn't that the way many of us have grown up? You get into a conflict with your parents or somebody else, and you run in your room and you close the door and you shut the world out. And that's become our pattern by which we deal with conflict resolution, which isn't resolution at all. It's just running away from the issues. And working with college ministry, we would sometimes get into discussions with different people that we knew, that were in the university setting. And I remember having a discussion with one of the guys who was a director of residence life at a university. And he would tell us stories about students and their interaction with one another. And one particular story really stood out to me where there were two roommates, and the one wasn't happy with the other one at all. And so on this particular day, the one roommate is sitting at her desk, and she's checking her email, and she gets this long email from the other one that is just scathing And it's just this list, this litany of all these horrible things that she's done, how bad that she's been as a roommate from the time that they first started living together. And this had been several months by now. And so there's this long list. And she didn't even realize there was a problem. And so she's looking at this kind of horrified. And guess where the other roommate was? Sitting at her own computer on the other side of the room. And so rather than sitting down together and saying, I have some concerns or issues or frustrations or whatever it might be, she writes this stockpiles this long list of offenses and then sends it by email. It just really speaks of something in our society that isn't good. And life was never meant to be this way. God didn't desire us to have these types of relationships. Now, up until this point, we've been talking mostly about individual identities. And indeed, it's significant. It's important that, we understand that you are a person favored and loved by God. There's no question about that. But we are also a people who are bound together by the new covenant. Without question, you are a person who is favored and loved by the God of the universe. But we need to also understand that we are a people who are bound together by the new covenant. We've already read from Romans chapter 9, 25 and 26, where Paul wrote, I will call those who were not my people, and I will call her who is unloved, my beloved. And in the very place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called the sons of the living God. Do you see the corporate element here? This isn't just an individual thing. There's a corporate mindset that is involved with us being the people of God. When we become Christians, we enter into a sacred and binding covenant with all other true believers. Think about that. What we've just discussed over the past few sessions about the concept of covenant and how unifying it is and how sacred it is and the significance of that type of a relationship. And so when we come into covenant with Christ, we come into covenant with all other believers. Do we realize the ramifications of this? That we truly become members of God's family, that we are blood brothers and sisters. This really is the essence of what the church is all about. We are blood brothers and sisters. Jesus said, as recorded in Mark 10, 29 and 30, I tell you the truth, there is no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for my sake and for the sake of the gospel, who will not receive in this age 100 times as much, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, fields, all with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life. Now, this passage, I think, is often misused or misinterpreted, where some will say, well, if you give $100 in church, it means you're going to get 100 times back. No, that's not the context of what he's talking about. What Jesus is saying is that whatever we sacrifice, whatever we give up as we come into relationship with God and in our service to him, it will be multiplied over time and time again as we come into covenant with the body of Christ. And so, if you're in a situation where you've had to walk away from family because they ostracize you or throw you out or whatever because of your devotion to Christ, there's this huge family of God that God has out there for us to draw into relationship with. And I'm not talking about an in-your-face type of an attitude towards parents who don't believe. I'm talking about those people who are in situations where they sacrifice, they lose so much because of their devotion to Jesus Christ, that God has it all out there. And it is all part of our covenant relationships that we have with the entire body of Christ. I know that the church has its warts, but when it's working as God intended it to be, there is nothing on earth that is so beautiful as the church of Jesus Christ. And it is the side that the media will rarely ever show you. Every single day, Christians all over the globe are sacrificially giving themselves to others because of their love for God. Every day across the face of the earth, there are people who are walking away from high-paying jobs, who are living in situations far below their capacity and their means, simply because they are devoted to him. And when you see the church at work the way that God intended it to be, it's an absolutely beautiful thing. It really is. Our world's in bad shape. There's no question about it. But if it were not for the influence of the church, it would be absolutely horrible and far worse than it is right now. Ministry to the poor and the orphans, laws to protect the vulnerable. Even some of our national education systems in this world are all products of the church. Missionaries have gone into other cultures and fought against the practices of, with discarding children, female children, or, just treating with contempt young people, vulnerable people, people that are powerless, people that God loves. Missionaries have gone into those areas and they have brought restoration and they have brought redemption, and they continue to do so in the face of incredible odds. There are entire nations whose educational systems were essentially built because Christian missionaries came from the U.S., from universities in the U.S., and went into other countries and began to teach what they had learned. And so the church has had a huge impact on the world in many good and profound ways. Many people avoid organized religion, and often it's because they've been hurt. And I understand that, and I certainly wouldn't make light of that in anybody's life. And I can say with all honesty, I've probably been as hurt just as much as the next person. And I've encountered some things that maybe I should have never encountered in my relationships with other Christians. But, it is what it is. And people are broken, and if we're going to have any types of relationships with people, you're going to have times of pain. And what we don't understand sometimes is that there is no way that you can have a meaningful relationship with Christ as the head if we don't have a relationship with his body. There's no way that we can have a meaningful relationship with Christ as the head if we don't have a relationship with his body. Now, it sounds absurd, but can you picture a wedding ceremony where you have a couple coming together and the wife says, well, I want to marry you, but I just want your head. I don't want the rest of you. It's just not going to happen, that type of situation. We want all of the person, and that's exactly what we're talking about with the body of Christ, that we can't have a relationship with him as the head if we don't have a relationship with his body. It doesn't work that way. The problem with leaving a local church because of personal hurt is that the pain goes with us. That when we leave, I guarantee you, the pain is not just going to disappear. It's not just going to go away. When you walk out those doors, the pain will go with you. But if we walk in maturity and work things through, God brings a powerful depth of healing and a profound richness in our lives through the relationships that we develop and that we build. And we really, in many ways, don't know what we're missing when we fail to build those relationships and when we fail to work through difficult issues. Now, am I saying that you should never leave a church? No, I'm not saying that at all. There are times when God calls us out. But the terms in which we leave are really the significant thing. Do we leave with the relationships being good and healthy as we go in obedience to God, or are we leaving a train wreck behind us as we go out with pain? And God's desire is that wherever we would go, it would be done from a place of spiritual maturity, that if there are broken relationships, we would work to bring healing and restoration in those circumstances. We can't build church relationships indiscriminately, and I understand that completely. Just because something's called church doesn't mean it's healthy. It doesn't mean that it's reflective of what Christ desires or expects. But at the same time, it is deadly to be isolated from the people of God. We'll be hurt when we're connected with other people. There's no question. But we will also be enriched. And since the crash, love and pain have become inseparable. Love and pain have become inseparable. And what the enemy tries to do is he tries to isolate us. How many of us have seen the animal kingdom shows? How do the lions get the wildebeest? They always isolate it. It's always by itself. Because when it's by itself, it becomes vulnerable. And they can prey upon it. They can prey upon, the powers of darkness can prey upon us, our thoughts, our ideas, everything in our lives, if we are isolated, if we're not living in connection with others. Love and pain are inseparable. When man chose to go independent from God, love and pain became partners in many ways. And it's just unavoidable. I'm often inspired by what I see as the faith-filled example of Moses, in particular in this regard, as I read from Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 to 26. By faith, when he grew up, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be ill-treated with the people of God than to enjoy sin's fleeting pleasure. He regarded abuse suffered for Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for his eyes were fixed on the reward. When you think about the life of Moses, a good portion of the abuse that Moses suffered was from the very people of God that he came to deliver. A lot of his heartache, a lot of the hurt that he experienced, a lot of the frustration and the agony he experienced came from the very people that he was called to deliver, the very people of God that he was trying to help. And do you see Moses becoming hard? Do you see him becoming bitter? Do you see him becoming cynical? No. Why not? Because he was looking to something greater. He was looking to Christ. He was looking to the reward. He realized that there was something far better than what he was experiencing. And so Moses walked away from all of the treasures and the glory and everything that went with it, all the abundance that went with it, all the fame that went with it, and being in the palace of Egypt. And he walked away from it all and considered the reproach of Christ to be of greater value than all of the treasures of Egypt. That just blows my mind. And what that tells me is that Moses was a man of faith who recognized the significance and the value of the kingdom of God. And that was what he was drawn to. And even in the spite of the pain that he went through, he was willing to move forward in that regard. There is something with the people of God that is of such significance that if we can see it, if we can understand it, we'll never let go. And again, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy process, but to have our lives enriched by the very people that Christ died for, by the very people that are growing into the image and the grace of God, to not have that, I think we live an existence that is far below anything that God has for us. We can't have a fulfilling relationship with Christ as the head if we aren't connected with his body. Relationship struggles form an unexpected bend in the road of our journeys. And it brings us back to the issue of glory that we started talking about weeks ago. Our quest for glory is bound up in our interaction with others. Our quest for glory is bound up in our interaction with others. Our view of our own personal significance is often largely influenced by our perception of how others view us. You know, it's so much of how we function, and we've talked about these things, has to deal with how others see us or how we perceive others as seeing us. And this really involves this concept of glory. The New Testament Greek word for glory is doxa, and it speaks of recognition, of high opinion, of renown. And that's really the idea that we use in our culture for the most part. The Hebrew root for glory, kabod, carries the idea of heaviness or weightiness. And so as a whole, glory speaks of the recognition of the substance of true greatness. Glory speaks of the recognition of the substance of true greatness. Isaiah 42:8 tells us that God will not share his glory with another. And that was a verse that, years back was really common, that, God won't share his glory with with another person. But the context of Isaiah 42:8 really is speaking of idolatry. It's speaking of idolatry, that when we try to put other people or things in the place of God, God will not share his glory with those idols. He will not share his glory with those things. However, God does desire to share his glory with his children. And this is a really significant thing for us to understand. God does desire to share his glory with his children. We were created in his image, as we talked about before. And this is an immense concept. It's absolutely huge for us. Adam and Eve forfeited the glory of God by seeking glory apart from God. And what we see is at the very core of humanism and of sin is the quest to seek glory apart from our Creator. It's the core of humanism. It's the desire to find goodness and significance within ourselves, a substance within ourselves, greatness within ourselves, apart from our Creator. There are few things that are as painful for us and as offensive as to be treated as insignificant in the eyes of others. When we don't receive the glory that we feel like we deserve, when we don't receive that sense of significance, we become offended in a big way. And this is something, again, that we all deal with, that there's something that gets at us when we don't get the recognition and the significance that we think that we deserve. Humanity was once clothed in the glory of God, but now we are left naked, and we are left with really what we could call a glory deficiency. That we were clothed in with the glory of God, and now there's a deficiency within us by which we crave glory, even though we don't necessarily get it. So we're always craving glory, and I don't care what your state in life is, we all crave glory. No matter what your state in life, we all crave glory. You could have two people walking down the street. And one of them's a businessman, and he's dressed in an expensive suit and, makes all kinds of money. And the other one is maybe a ditch digger. And they're walking down the street, and they're looking at each other. And the businessman is looking at the ditch digger, and he's thinking, what a Neanderthal. He doesn't have any brains. I'll bet his only ability is to be able to use a shovel. Look how dirty and torn he is. If he had any real ability or any real brains, he'd be making some money like I am. And the ditch digger is looking at the businessman, and he's saying to himself, paper pusher, I'll bet he never worked a day in his life. And this is the world in which we live, that no matter what state we're in, we are looking for glory for ourselves. We're looking for significance for ourselves. And we're kind of looking down on others who aren't what we are or who don't measure up to the standards that we think that we meet. My mother was one of the most humble people that I've ever met in my entire life. And I say that with all honesty. But she's human just like everybody else. And she had her thing. She had her thing of glory. And for my mom, it was her baking pans. My mother would scrub her pans until they were absolutely shining. And they certainly didn't look like this. If she saw one of these, she would be upset. And our neighbor who lived next door to us, Helen, always kept her baking pans looking like this. And I can remember Mom going on a rant one day and just more or less saying, I can't believe her. I can't believe her pans. I can't believe how dirty and how tarnished they are, that she doesn't scrub them and she doesn't keep them clean. And, when you stop and you think about it, baking pans aren't really a big deal. But it's just like anybody, we find our places of glory. We find those things in life that we want to latch onto, and that becomes our standard. That becomes our thing by which we can draw a sense of significance in this world. Whether it be baking pans, whether it be our expensive suit, whether it be a high-paying job, or whether it be working with your hands. It can be anything. It can be the things that we buy. We look for glory because we have that glory deficiency as a result of the crash. One of the great mysteries of life is that those who seek glory forfeit the glory that would be theirs. One of the great mysteries of life is that those who seek glory forfeit the glory that would be theirs. Whatever we selfishly seek, we lose. Whatever we give up for God, we gain. Jesus talked about this in Mark, as is recorded in Mark 8:35. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel will save it. You see, we can receive God's glory, but we cannot take it. We can receive God's glory, but we cannot take it. We can't glorify ourselves, but we do receive glory as a gift when we choose to humble ourselves for God's honor. And this is a really significant thing for us to understand. And Jesus talked about this in the Beatitudes. In Matthew chapter 6, he talked about putting money in the offering plate. And, essentially was saying that when you give, not necessarily offering plate, but when you give, don't give to get everybody's attention. Don't give so that the world will see, but give in secret, and your Father who's in secret will reward you. And the point here is that whenever we give or whenever we do anything in such a way that we're drawing attention to ourselves, where we're looking for that glory, we're looking for that admiration from others and from that applause or whatever it might be, do you know what our reward is whenever we do that? It's that applause. I could put $1 million in the offering plate on a Sunday morning, and if my purpose in doing that is to get people to admire me and say how wonderful of a person I am, I have just gotten my full reward whenever they do that. The money means nothing to God if my reasoning is to bring attention to myself and to get a sense of significance and self-glorification. My reward is when people applaud me, and the rest of it means absolutely nothing in the eyes of God. We seek human glory because it carries such a rush with it. It's like a drug high to the soul. And there are a few things that can compare with that rush, with that high. And so we go to great lengths to get that feeling of glory. But one of the big problems is that glow of human glory fades incredibly quickly. Like the outgoing tide, whenever it begins to go out, it is gone. And there's absolutely nothing that we can do to stop it. We are powerless to stop the flow whenever it leaves. And so we find ourselves naked and struggling, feeling low and depressed because we have lost that high. We have lost that exaltation, that sense of exaltation that we had. And, and I think we've all experienced this in one way or another. Those maybe that are involved in performing arts, you might have a performance and everything goes incredibly well. You work and you work and you work in preparation and everything comes off without a hitch and it goes extremely well and you're just elated. You're on top of the world until the next morning. And the next morning, it's all gone. And there's this incredible low that can come into our lives as a result of the glory that is now gone, of the tide going out. I think this is a big problem for pastors, to be honest with you. So much energy and emotion is put into a Sunday sermon that oftentimes, there's this high, and the next day they can just bottom out because all of the glory has now faded. We're all susceptible to this. So what do we do when the glory goes? Well, we sulk, we cry, we eat, we shop, we perform, we try harder, we eat some more, we shop some more. We do whatever we can to get that sense of glory back. I think that's one of the big things with compulsive shopping. There's a high that's involved with buying that thing. But as soon as the ink on the receipt is dry, the glory begins to fade, and now we have to go off for something else. And so, like a drowning person, a dying ego flounders and flails around and does not want to go under. It doesn't want to die. And so when we begin to starve that ego and that hunger for glory, it does all kinds of whacked out things in our lives. The pursuit of glory and the motivation of sin are innately connected with one another. Romans 3:23 is just another one of those passages that I wrestled with for a long time. And again, many of us are familiar with this, where Paul wrote, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." And, many of us have memorized that. But the thing that always plagued me is, why does he add and fall short of the glory of God? I mean, for all have sinned, that makes perfect sense. But all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. What is he trying to communicate? Well, I think the idea is that the glory of God is our goal. That's what we're trying to seek after whenever we sin, is that we're seeking the glory of God apart from God. The Greek word here used for sin is hamartano, and it means to miss the mark. Literally means to miss the mark. And the picture that you would have would be that of a target, and an archer is shooting at the target, and he's missing the target. That's what it's communicating. And so our target for life is self-validation, is self-significance. It's finding that sense of glory within ourselves apart from God, based on our performance, based on our possessions, our appearance, anything that this world looks at to lift us up, anything that's law-based, any type of standard where we can get a sense of significance. This is what human nature is trying to do, is trying to draw that significance from these types of things. But we each continue to fall hopelessly short in the light of the substance of God's true greatness. Stop and think about it. We're all shooting our arrows. And these arrows are the goal is the glory of God. We're looking for that significance. We're looking for that perfection. We're looking for that greatness. And nobody's arrows are going very far. They're all falling hopelessly short of God's standard of perfection. And what ends up happening is that, we're all in this process of shooting the arrows, and your arrow may go further than mine. You might have a lot more to offer. Yours might be in a whole lot better shape than mine is, but I can guarantee you, yours is still going to be woefully inadequate and far short of God's glory. And this is why we are so drawn in to the fig leaves, because they leave the impression that our arrows are going further than they actually are. If my fig leaves are good, then they leave the impression that my arrows are going further than the arrows of others. In the eyes of humanity, you may be somebody, but in the eyes of eternity, each of us is a total failure in our pursuit of self-significance. Each of us is a total failure in our pursuit of glory apart from God. And so we're tormented with fear at the suspicion that our arrows fall short. It bothers us incredibly. And when we discover the truth of the reality of this, that we don't measure up, we find ourselves very depressed and very down. And we've got a choice of how we're going to respond to that. We either go into a downward spiral, or we pursue Christ, or we just work harder and we try harder to be somebody of significance. And of course, this comes back to the whole issue of isolation. That, I don't want anybody to see the real me. I've got to keep up that impression. And so I've got to protect my image. And this is where we come back to the technologies of today, where they help us to do this. They help us to find a virtual community where we can build relationships, but we can safely hide our shortcomings from those who might have the ability to see any imperfection in our lives. We are able through virtual relationships to build some sort of sense of community, but we can keep people at a distance. And that way they don't have to see my imperfections that they might frown on. You understand, if I enter a chat room, I can be anybody I want to be. I can be this ripped bodybuilder with six-pack abs as soon as I enter into a chat room. I can be anybody. I can tell the world whatever I want to tell them because of the virtual reality in which we live. And I can build those types of relationships where people don't know or see the real me. And I realize this is kind of an extreme thought with this, and many of us don't go to these extremes to this degree. But at the same time, the same principles at work in many of our lives. Simply put, the human psyche cannot function properly with a glory deficiency. Simply put, the human psyche cannot function properly with a glory deficiency. And so we either find significance as a byproduct of our love for God and for others, or we search for glory by trying to measure up to human standards of perfection. We either find significance as a byproduct of our relationship with God, or we search for glory by trying to measure up to human standards of perfection. And as strange as it might sound, it is a life and death choice. That when our sense of significance, when our sense of glory comes as a byproduct of our love for Him, as we humble ourselves and pursue Him, there is a release of grace into our lives, and the life flow of God brings healing and wholeness and transformation. But whenever we seek to live up to standards, law-based standards of performance or appearance or any of those types of things that our world so values, when that becomes the draw, the place from which we draw our sense of significance, our sense of goodness, our sense of identity, our sense of substance, when that's the avenue that we pursue, spiritual death is the result. The transition from a humanistic pursuit of self-significance to a grace-filled life of humility requires a deliberate mental discipline. This does not happen by default. It does not happen naturally. We have to be deliberate to make this upgrade into God's grace. Have you ever been frustrated at how often prideful thoughts fill your mind? It's not like we calculate them. It's not like we call them up. They're just there. They just come out of nowhere sometimes. Or maybe it's the other thing, that we're plagued by a deep sense of unworthiness that we just can't get past. So often the issue, again, is our focus. It's where our attention is drawn. We can never forget our sinfulness, but our focus needs to be on the goodness of God. We can never forget our sinfulness. That has to be something that we always have a realization of. But at the same time, our focus should not be on how unworthy or how terrible we are. Our focus should be on God and on His goodness and on His love for our lives. Praise, worship, and thanksgiving pull our eyes off of us and bring us into alignment with God's divine order. And you remember we talked about that. We talked about God's divine order where we have God, humanity, and creation. And that order gets skewed. But when we worship God, when we thank God, when we praise God, we're acknowledging His supremacy and we're bringing our lives back into alignment with His order. And there's a release of grace that happens in our lives. God alone can receive worship without becoming self-centered. God alone is worthy of that glory and that honor because He alone is not self-absorbed. As a matter of fact, I believe that God's unselfish love is one of the key components of genuine greatness. That when we talk about true glory, It's not about the ability to perform better than others. It's not about having the best team. It's not about winning the gold medal. It's about selfless love in serving God. I recently I was watching a basketball game on TV, and during intermission, during a break, or a timeout or whatever, the players were all on the sidelines, and there were the custodians that come out, and they were wiping off the floor. And it dawned on me that from the position or from the perspective of eternity, the real glory was those who were selflessly serving, not those who were exalting themselves. In the eyes of humanity, it's those who perform the best. But the eyes of eternity, it's those who serve and give of themselves the most. That's glory from the perspective of heaven. That's true greatness. And so the heart of glory, true glory, lies not in seeking personal status, but in selflessly giving ourselves for the benefit of others. It's not in lifting ourselves, it's in pouring ourselves out. It's in going lower in order that others might be lifted up. That's what honors God, and that's the unselfish heart that God has, and that really is the substance of His greatness. We are blessed when we are an unselfish blessing to the world around us. God promises that when we humble ourselves for His sake, His unfading glory will be our rear guard. God will have our back. In other words, in this crazy world of fleeting popularity, God will be there to care for us and to watch us, regardless of what goes on. See, the problem with mankind, or one of the problems with mankind, is that our humanistic love always becomes self-glorifying. You know, there are some people out there who do some really awesome things for the sake of this world or for the people in this world. The problem is that they become self-enamored with their efforts. You know, the attitude becomes, aren't we so awesome in our noble causes? Aren't we so great because we're doing this? And they begin to look down on others who aren't doing the same things or who aren't making the same sacrifices. And it's back to the whole idea of we're created in the image of God. We can do good things, but it's tainted by sin and selfishness. And so humanistic love will always begin to exalt itself. And as soon as it begins to exalt itself, it becomes offensive to God. You know, I think that many people today in our day have very noble ideas and very noble actions, but their boasting reeks like dead fish. Is this making sense? We can do wonderful things, but as soon as we begin to lift ourselves up because of what we've done, we are now offensive to God because we are trying to establish our own sense of significance apart from Him. I remember one time it was in the summer, it was very, very hot, and I had caught some fish and cleaned the fish, and I left the carcasses in the garbage outside in 90-degree weather. And so garbage day rolled around, and I had to go take it out to the curb, and I don't have the strongest stomach in the world to begin with. And so I pick up this bag of garbage, and it is just really bad. It's really rank. And I carry it out, and I'm just kind of like trying to keep it away from breathing it, and it's just bad. And so I finally get it out, and I get it to the curb, and I get in the car, and I go to work. And I'm driving to work, and I'm just thinking, I can still smell that garbage. And I get to work, and I'm doing, my duties and everything, and I'm smelling. Something really smells around here. This really stinks. And I can't find it. And so I'm doing a little bit more, and I'm looking at, what is that smell? And I look down, and here on my shoe are 2 little drops of fish juice that had come out of the garbage bag and had landed on my shoe. And they just stunk to high heaven. And it really provides a picture for us of our lives that, everything about us can be fine in so many ways, and we can be doing so many good things. But the minute, the second, the nanosecond that we begin to lift ourselves up because of our nobility and our greatness, it becomes a reek. It begins to, it's a stench in God's nostrils is really what it comes down to. Our human pride corrupts anything good that we might seek to accomplish. And trying to wrestle against that pride never works. You see, that would seem like that's the way to solve the problem, is that, you begin to feel prideful thoughts where you just kind of stuff it down or you wrestle against it. That never works. We will boast. I guarantee you that we will boast because we are wired for glory. Being created in the image of God, having been clothed in the glory of God, we are wired for glory. Those who can't boast will spiral into depression or worse. The secret is to channel our boasting in the direction of the only one who is truly worthy of glory. Your heart is going to want to be lifted up. I guarantee it. You know, when you serve, when you give, there's a common grace that God gives us for giving that you know, when you give, you feel good. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to turn it back to God and to honor Him and to give Him glory, or do you use it for yourself? Do you try to draw attention to yourself or get significance for yourself? And what do we boast? You know, do we boast in our cars and our houses? Do we boast in celebrities, in athletes, in a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Do we boast in ourselves? Is anything that is created really worthy of glory? Aren't all created things imperfect? Don't they all decay? You know, I like to fish, and I like to catch big fish. And you know, there's a real temptation to boast when you catch a big fish. But dead fish die, and they stink. Nothing of this created order is worthy of the glory that belongs to the God of the universe. God alone is worthy. And if He were to act as though He weren't, He would be a liar. Because He alone is worthy of that glory. To ignore or refuse to worship God violates the divine order of His creation, cutting off the life flow of His grace and enslaving us to the very things that we glorify. Again, in Romans, Paul writes about this, Romans chapter 1. For although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God or give Him thanks, but they became futile in their thoughts and their senseless hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for an image resembling mortal human beings or birds or four-footed animals or reptiles. We become slaves to the very things that we glorify, unless it's Him that we're giving the honor and the glory. Our human pride is a stench to high heaven, and our human glory fades as quickly as a puff of smoke on a windy day. It is gone in an instant. And if we don't find our sense of significance and our validation from our relationship with our Creator, we will be subject to the compulsive world of human approval. That will be the thing that drives us. That'll be the thing that fills our thoughts and fills our minds and motivates us in all that we do. True freedom and lasting significance come only as we restore God to His rightful place of supremacy in the very depths of our hearts. Only when we put Him on the throne of our hearts. Only when He becomes the one who is supreme. When He becomes our first love. When He becomes the source of our honor. When He becomes the one we lift up. Then life is put in its order and life works. May we never forget that the essence of God's glory is unselfish by nature. And He simply refuses to extend it to those who are self-centered. And we see this evident in the life of Christ. We see all of what we're talking about essentially in the life of Christ and the way that He lived. And in particular, the high priestly prayer that we find in John chapter 17. We see God's heart extended towards us in relationship to this concept. John 17, 22 to 23, Jesus says, "The glory you gave me, I have given to them, that they may be one just as we are one. I and them and you and me, that they may be completely one, so that the world will know that you sent me, and you have loved them just as you have loved me. The glory you gave to me, I have given to them." The glory you gave me, I have given to them. That is God's heart, that He would clothe His children in His glory. And so we can receive that glory as a gift from God when we humble ourselves, but we can't take it for ourselves, or we will lose it instantly. God's desire for us, once again, is to be clothed in His unfading glory. But Christ's emphasis here, again, is corporate. That it's not just about us as individuals. That glory lies not in unique individualism, like the lone hero riding off into the sunset. You know, we've all seen those types of movies. But glory lies in humbling ourselves in selfless unity as the body of Christ. That when we humble ourselves, when we walk in love, and we walk in relationships with other believers, and we give them places of honor and places of significance in our lives, we treat them with respect and love and compassion and everything that goes with that. When we live that type of a life, that's when the glory of God really is released into our lives and when it's expressed. All of these truths bring us full circle in our search for validation. Brings us right back to where we started. And we realize that in the end, the search for me isn't so much a search for me as it is a search for Him. It's not about me, it's about Him. And when I discover that it's not about me, and I find myself in Him, then I actually find out who I am. I find who my Creator has destined me to be. And so the search for Him is a journey. It's a journey home, essentially. It's going back to where we were created to be, into this face-to-face covenant relationship with the God who created us, who still loves us with an amazing love. And this, my friends, is a journey that we are privileged to take together as the church, the body of Christ. Let me pray. Father, we are wired for glory. There's something in our hearts that desires greatness, Lord God. There's something within us, Lord, that doesn't want to be the worst of the worst or the low of the low. Lord, and I am totally convinced that it's because we were created in your image and that we are wired for glory. Lord, that your desire is for significance for your people and not for insignificance. And Father, I also understand that so often our hearts seek that glory through ourselves, through our own abilities, through our own performance, through the approval of others. And Lord, we're choosing to lay these things down. And Lord, we're choosing to exalt you as the one who is truly worthy of glory. God, with our words, with our deeds, with our lifestyles, Lord, we so desire to honor you in every way, shape, and form. And Lord, all the things that we've learned through these past several sessions, I realize that it's a lot. We're asking you, Lord God, that you would take these truths and that you would integrate them into our lives and into our hearts, and that you would write your laws upon our hearts. And God, that we would be a people who is passionately in love with you, and we would be a people who seeks after your honor and your glory. Lord, that through our lives, you would be lifted up and that you would be exalted in the world around you. And that many, many others would be drawn to you and drawn to your name because they see your glory at work in our lives. Thank you, Lord, for all that you've been doing in our lives and all that you continue to do. We pray, God, that you would continue to perfect your work in our hearts, and we continue to give you the freedom to be God as we are your servants. For your glory and honor. Amen. Amen. Well, folks, this session brings our time together to a close, and I sure hope that your participation in this study has had a deep impact on your personal walk with God and on your relationships with others. Now, I'll be the first to admit that if you have grasped and absorbed half of what I talked about through this study, I think that you're doing pretty well. I realize I presented a lot of material. I realize I presented some challenging concepts. I've been studying and learning about and teaching these things for much of my life, and God's still working them into me to become a part of who I am. And one of the things that I've discovered is that some of these concepts are so integral to our existence that you don't ever move on from them. You never outgrow them. You never mature beyond them. They become a foundation on which we build the remainder of our entire lives. Now, if this is your first time through the Search for Me series, I would encourage you to consider going through it again, maybe with a smaller group of 3 to 5 people, maybe extending it over a longer period of time. Again, we just need to be deliberate in our ability and our efforts to understand concepts that are essential to our existence. At the same time, you may want to think about inviting somebody else to participate, maybe a friend or a neighbor, somebody that you know that you think would really benefit from this study. If you've been through it more than once and you feel like you've grown a lot and you're grasping the concepts, maybe God's calling you to lead a group. And so, we've got instructions for group facilitators, and you might want to talk to your church leadership about possibly playing that type of role at some point in the future. Finally, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for all those who have contributed to this study in any way. There are many, many people who have given in one way or another, from our models to our crew to our volunteers. Without their help, our financial supporters, our prayer supporters, without their help, there's no way that we would have been able to pull this off. Even at that, the fact that we were able to do this is nothing short of miraculous, to see the hand of God do something that really challenged my wildest dreams and imaginations. If you're interested in learning more about Search for Me Ministries, you can check out our website at www.sfme.org. You can sign up for my weekly blog. You can connect with us on one of the social networking sites if you'd like to do that. If God's touched your life through this series, maybe you want to post a testimony about what He's done and how He's touched your heart. Our hope is to provide more life-changing resources in the future, although I'm not sure that I want to get in front of the camera anymore. But we want to be able to provide resources for the church. And in order for that to happen, we do need people to partner with us to help this become a reality. When it comes to ministry partnership, our motto is opportunity without pressure. We want to provide an opportunity for people to participate and get involved, but in no way do we want to pressure anybody to do something that they don't necessarily feel called to do, and we don't want to put a sense of obligation on anybody in that process. And so it's there if you'd like to participate somehow. At the same time, there's no pressure. If you don't feel called to do that, then we just release you to do what you feel God has called you to do, and to use your energy and your time and your money to somehow advance His kingdom and touching people through the way that God's called you to touch them. Again, thank you so much for participating, and my prayer is that God would just continue to bless you richly as you continue to seek His face.